Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Will Barclay. Will Barclay represents the 120th Assembly District. That's an Assembly District that includes the counties of Oswego, Onondaga, and Jefferson. And we want to thank you folks all throughout the region for joining us. And happy 2016 to you, Will Barclay.
Same to you, Mike. Good to see you.
It's nice to see you. We've got a lot to get caught up on. At the end of 2015, we saw the conviction of two former legislative leaders. We're going to be talking about some of the reform cloud that is hanging over this legislature as it starts out 2016. We've already heard from the governor.
The reform's the sunshine. The ethics is the cloud, right? We need the reform to clear the ethics cloud out of Albany.
Much more adeptly put than what I just said. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
You want to? Maybe we should
Take
switch
over?
this
Sure.
around.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The other part of this is we've heard from the governor already in his budget proposal, so we'll talk a little bit about what you think of his proposed budget, potential impact on the 120th district.
Yep.
But I got to start off by asking you about the news regarding the FitzPatrick Nuclear Plant.
Yeah, this is clearly the biggest issue going on in my district right now. You may or may not know this. In Oswego County, we have 3 nuclear power plants. We have 9 Mile 1, 9 Mile 2, and the FitzPatrick Nuclear Plant. Always been great corporate citizens for the community, obviously employ a lot of employees for Oswego County, and also help our tax base significantly. So we were very taken back this fall when Entergy, the owner of the FitzPatrick plant, announced that they may be not refueling the plant, which essentially will lead to it shutting down in 2017. We were very hopeful throughout the fall. We rallied community support to try to get the recognition that we have to do something in government to try to help the plant remain operational. We were very hopeful that the government would come in and negotiate a deal with Entergy to keep the plant open. Those negotiations have dragged on, unfortunately, and really the tragic bit about this is it doesn't look like it's moving in the bad direction, not a positive direction right now. So we have 615 people that work at the plant, and to have that closed down really would be catastrophic for Oswego County. In order to combat this, we've done a number of things. I said we've tried to rally the community to show that we really are a pro-nuclear community in Oswego County, and we very much support the FitzPatrick plant. Just recently, Senator Patty Ritchie and myself have introduced legislation to help address and provide some economic support for the plant. As you know, with low natural gas prices, nuclear energy, first of all, is very reliable, very efficient generation of power. But unfortunately, with the energy prices being as low as they are, it's very hard economically to run a nuclear power plant. That could very possibly change, hopefully would change over the next few years, but for right now they need some sort of help from the government in order to remain economical. So we've introduced 3 pieces of legislation that's going to help that. The first one's very easy to understand. It's a tax credit for the nuclear power plant that would provide Entergy, or the FitzPatrick plant specifically, $60 million for 1 year. And people say, well, why? Stop. We don't want to. Why are we providing all that money for a private entity? And I say, first of all, look at the film tax. We do it all the time in New York State. Look at the film tax credit where we supply movie companies, an entity that you would think would probably the least need any kind of government assistance. We provide over $400 million of tax credits.
I remember the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
That's what I was going to say. Jimmy Fallon, $20 million a year on a regular basis they get in tax credit. They employ about 200 people. So we're asking for a one-time tax credit of $60 million to help support this plant to get over the bad economic times right now, to save 615 jobs. And it's important to understand nuclear power plants, although they're not economical right now, or they're facing some economic challenges right now, you can't just shut them down for a couple of years and then bring them back online when the economics change. These things either got to keep running or you shut them down permanently. I think the energy markets constantly change. Nuclear energy has to be part of our diverse energy portfolio in New York State. If we shut down all our plants that are currently not economical, we're going to end up with just natural gas. At some point, natural gas prices are going to go back up, and then we're going to be stuck with higher energy prices going forward. The other thing about nuclear, why we ought to support it, it's clean energy. It's no emission, no CO2 emissions. The governor's talked about reaching 50% of non-emitting generators by 2030. I think 50 by 30 is his goal. He's not going to be able to do that without nuclear power. So if we're really serious about cutting CO2 emissions from our energy generators, nuclear's got to be part of that mix.
I know you want to enumerate those other couple of bills
Yep.
that you've got, but one of the things I was struck with was that when you say we're a pro-nuclear community. I mean, the people watching the show are already in the community. They know what they got. They know what's going on with this. But I'm sure that if people outside your assembly district area are watching this, they're going, really? You want nuclear power plants in your community? Boy, it doesn't seem like something I'd want in my backyard.
Right.
You know?
Well, first of all, we've had them for since the '60s, so this is not a new employer or something coming in. I can understand where people wouldn't necessarily want them in their backyard, but these are very safe, operational type plants. They provide thousands of jobs, and they help our tax base. They've been great neighbors for us in Oswego County. And I think they can make a very strong case that they're very good for New York State, and we should do everything we can to prevent our nuke plants from shutting down.
Sounds like they're some of your biggest employers.
They are, yeah. The 9 Mile 1 and 2 may be the biggest employer in Oswego County.
So what are the other? So what are these other bills? What would they do?
So the other ones doesn't actually add any more, take any more money out of the general fund. It's one we have a number of years ago. We entered in this regional greenhouse gas initiative, which essentially is where they auction off emitters for plants that emit CO2 have to buy credits to be able to do that, and the state gets, I don't know, a substantial amount of money, something like $150 million a year or more by auctioning off these emission credits. We would like nuclear to share in that and the amount the state gets. So we're not adding more costs. We're just currently solar and wind get that money. Nuclear, since it doesn't emit, we think ought to get a piece of that money too. And then the last part is, you may have seen on your electric bill, but you pay something called the system benefit charge or the renewable energy portfolio charge. And it's on everybody's bill, which the state collects off your bill to try to encourage, and they spend the money to encourage renewable energy like solar and wind. Again, we think nuclear should also be able to share in some of those proceeds because we don't emit CO2. And the difference between nuclear and solar and wind is nuclear can run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's very reliable. It's much more efficient. It's something like 95% efficient to generate the electricity, where wind and solar, maybe at 30, 35%. So you get your most bang for your buck by generating electricity through nuclear. It seems to me, if we're really serious about lowering emissions in New York State, again, nuclear needs to be part of the mix. So these three bills is going to go a long ways, and hopefully, if we can't convince Entergy to continue operation of the FitzPatrick plant, maybe we get a third-party operator come in and operate the plant so we can keep nuclear part of Oswego County and also part of the mix in New York State.
You expecting those bills to be heading up to the legislature sometime
Yeah,
soon?
we've introduced them. We're going to start circulating them, try to get support from other members. We've also circulated them around the community, so we have labor support on these bills, we have business support on this bill, and we have local government support on this legislation.
Right. We'll keep in touch with you about the process, the progress of those as they make their way through the system. In our remaining few minutes here, we got to get to some of that other business we talked about, and time's a wasting. Right. You so adeptly put it that there's a dark cloud hanging over this legislature. We need to make that cloud go away by bringing in some reforms. When you see the legislative leaders convicted of corruption, using their positions for their own personal benefit, something's got to give. Yeah,
Mike, it's really been an embarrassment, obviously, over the last several years. You keep hearing one more conviction, you say, well, now things are going to change, we're not going to continue on, and then, geez, the apex of all this corruption finally hit the, rubber hit the road with the conviction of both the Speaker and the Majority Leader in the Senate. So it's really too bad. One of the problems I've said on this show many a times is the power is too consolidated at the top. The leaders have too much control, and as a result of having all that control, when anybody presents them with something maybe on the edge, I think the temptation is too great, and they grab it. So what in my mind, a great ethics reform would do would really change the way Albany operates. It would help with corruption, a whole host better government policy is by trying not to take some of that power away and give it more to the rank and file members. And our conference has introduced a number of pieces of legislation and rules changes that I think will go a long ways. Some easy things to understand. And a lot of this is inside baseball, little changes here and there, which would make a big difference, but generally I don't know how much the public understands or cares about some of the little tinkering, but some easy things to understand and seems like common sense that people would support. Term limits for leaders. Why not? Why have like the speaker who was in there for what, 21 years?
20-something years, yeah.
20-something years. He was able to consolidate so much power that even when people knew that, maybe something wasn't completely right, no one wanted to challenge him, because you challenge him, you lose whatever position you had and you get sent back down.
A couple of people did try to challenge him over the years.
And we saw what happened.
They went away.
Mike Bregman from Central New York is a great example of that.
Yeah.
So I think term limits for leaders makes a lot of sense. Not only it would prevent people from being able to consolidate that much power, but what's wrong with getting a little new energy once in a while and some new ideas? So, and we're not talking a short term. I think the proposals vary, but 8 years. So it's not like you're a leader for 1 year and then you got to get out. It's enough to help get done whatever you think ought to be done, but at the same time it doesn't allow, as I said, the consolidation of power. That's an easy. Another simple one to grasp in my mind: if a majority of legislators sign on and want a bill to be passed, so we have 150 members in the Assembly, if you get 76 sponsors, this is my colleague Jim Tedisco's bill, he calls it the spirit of 76. If you get 76 members on that bill, it has to get to the floor for a vote. Very often the majority in our House uses a committee process to kill one bill after another. Great piece of to that have the support of a majority members in the Assembly can never get to the floor for a vote. It seems to me very common. If people change their mind, they get the legislation on the floor and it doesn't pass, so be it. But it seems to me if you have 76 members, a majority of the Assembly members on the bill sponsoring, saying we want this to become law in New York State, doesn't it seem to make sense that we have that come to the floor for a vote?
And this isn't just a minority gambit here, because we know that there are bills sponsored by majority members that also cannot get to the floor. And right now there's a bill, whatever you folks might think of mixed martial arts, New York is the only state in the nation that doesn't sanction MMA bouts from taking place in New York, in their state. The number 2 man in the majority, the number 2 Democrat, the only guy above him is the Speaker, is carrying a bill to deal with this. He can't get that bill onto the floor, even though it's clearly a popular issue. People want to talk about it. People want to debate it. There may be enough votes to pass it. I don't know.
Do you think there would be? If there's 76 members, it's only, why would you sponsor a bill that you don't want to see passed? And it's unfortunate, Mike, because there's a small minority of some members out in New York City and the MMA bill that are opposed to it for a variety of reasons. Some of them have to do with the hotel trades in Las Vegas, of all things, are holding it back. So why should this little minority of members from New York City be able to block legislation that a majority, big M majority of members in the Assembly want to get passed? So MMA is a great example, but there's a lot of other bills out there.
And it all comes down to the fact that it is the Speaker who can say, no, that bill won't come forward.
Right.
It's
and we've seen it in other, it's not just in legislation. I've seen it in ethics. Same with, we've said that one of the problems with some of the ethics complaints that have been brought by the Assembly. This former Speaker, kept some of these ethics complaints from even going to the Ethics Committee. So no one should have that much power. It corrupts, obviously.
He brokered some backroom deals with some of those ethics situations, paying off the victims a certain amount of money.
I didn't vote on them.
Nobody knew about it.
I know that the Ethics Committee voted on it. Right. Yeah. So we need reform. This is embarrassment. We need the sunshine to come out with our reform proposals.
We've got less than a minute, so we don't have time to get into the budget. But the hearings are going on right now. You heard from the governor.
Yeah, just as you know where we stand. The governor proposed his budget. Now the legislature and the Senate and Assembly hold hearings on various aspects of the budget, and then hopefully we'll be looking at April 1st budget passed. But we can talk more about that in future shows.
We'll be getting into some serious budget talk in our upcoming programs. All right, we look forward to that. Will Barclay, thanks as always for joining us. You folks want to know how to reach out to your representative, you can get a hold of Will Barclay at his office in Fulton, dial 598-5185, or send an email to barclayw@assembly.state.ny.us. And again, as we thank Will Barclay for joining us, thank you folks too. Hope to see you soon for our next Assembly Calendar.